Okay, starting on my senior presentation. Okay, so I'm talking about the public sphere. And how do we define this space? So the public sphere is just a multi-spatial space. So by that I mean it's virtual and both physical as well. So within the public sphere, there's other systems like ecological, political, and technological systems that are happening at the same time. So because of these other systems is why we're able to have a public sphere. So in the public spheres, where people come together and discuss and share and critically debate ideas on how to handle social problems and to establish what is best for the community. Okay? So given that the public sphere is just this multi-spatial space where we define how to solve problems for the community, I thought about how that always leaves someone out, because if there's a group of people defining what's best for the community, that's always somehow going to leave someone out. So for my thesis project, I say, this concept of public sphere, which I just call PS, is expanding every single time a philosopher defines it, and I use 5 different philosophers as you see in your chart. So it expands every single time the philosophy defines it. Therefore, I claim we need this recognition that there is no perfect public sphere. There will always be someone left out, and I just call this recognition that there's always going to be someone left out of the sphere, PS+. So PS+ is not just adding onto the philosopher's definition of public sphere, it's just literally looking at the conversation they're having and looking back and saying, okay, I see a trend here. Great, it keeps expanding and getting bigger, but wait, there's always going to be someone left out for some reason or another, because think about that this public sphere is happening within other systems, right? It's interconnected with so many other systems, like I said in the definition, with ecological, social, and political and technological systems. So we just need that recognition to just to say, yeah, we need to keep expanding the public sphere, but we just need to recognize that it will never be perfect. So that's my thesis. And so now we're going to go over 5 different philosophers that I went through for my senior to kind of explain this concept of the public sphere. And so 5 different philosophers. I'm going from the ancient Greeks to modern Enlightenment and 1 contemporary philosopher. Okay, and I'm also going to go over each philosopher's worldview. So we're going to start with Socrates and Aristotle. Their worldview is that there's order in the world, there's this objectivity outside of us, and we should look onto that objectivity to establish who should rule, because those people that will rule will know what's best for the city, right? So Socrates in his Republic, Plato's Republic had Socrates. So Socrates in his perfect republic, this just city, has people, the philosophers, in charge of the public sphere, right? Because he says that philosophers should rule the city, because if this is going to be a perfect and just city, every single person needs to be assigned just one task. So the philosopher will know which one task each person needs to do, because the metric that he uses is the soul. So according to your soul disposition is what you should do in the city. So the philosopher gets to assign that. So meaning, if I drew a dot right here, that's how big the public sphere of Plato is, of Socrates. So if you're sitting all the way back there, you can't even see this dot. And the point is, this is not really a public sphere. It's a completely private sphere. The philosophers are the ones in charge of everything. So that really leaves everybody else out. And just because it leaves people out, like future generations won't be. What I'm saying is, future generations can't have the chance to be rulers, because their soul disposition is not dependent on other parents' soul disposition. Okay? Now we move on to Aristotle, which follows Plato. So Aristotle, in his politics, his public sphere is this thing that he calls the polis, which is just like the city-state, and the people that are in that sphere are just Greek men, wealthy Greek men. So if we go from Plato / Socrates, there's a dot, right, the philosophers, and then we expand it a little bit because now it's a group of people, and it's the white Greek people, okay? So great, that expands a little bit. And his metric that he was using was nature, right? Because like I said, the ancients used something outside of themselves to create this hierarchy, this order in the cosmos, in their world. So yeah, so if it's Greek men in his public sphere, that means he's leaving out women, slaves, non-Greeks, right? Okay. So now we move on to Machiavelli, which could be considered the father of modern philosophy, and he's pushing back against the ancient philosophers like Aristotle and Plato. And his worldview is that the world is just chaos. There's no order, and we can never establish that order. It's really subjective, and it's up to the person to get what they want. So that means everyone can rule, right? So, and his public sphere is more like this principality, because the book that I used for him was The Prince, and he's specifically addressing this book to prince men. But I argue that this is also directed to the masses. This is a complete shift of consciousness on how we should act and how we should do our life and live our lives. So he used human reason. He said, through human reason, every single person can know what's best for them, and it is up to that person to know what's best for them, and you should get what you want out of this life. You should not wait until the next lifetime. So the people that he leaves out of his public sphere, I would say, are maybe people that are cowards and people who lack reason. But then again, I want to push back a little bit against Machiavelli and say, you're never just a coward because you want to be. That too is sometimes circumstantial. And maybe think about this as Owen Flanagan's famous book, Owen Flanagan's kind of theory that you're never outside of circumstance, and morality is highly based on circumstance. So that's kind of maybe how we can push back a little bit on Machiavelli. Okay, so now we move forward and we go to Kant. So Kant, in his worldview, he was around the Enlightenment era. So in his worldview, he thinks we can all know things, and we're all equal because we all have reason and we can know things. So in his famous essay, What is Enlightenment? He says, the question is, have we reached enlightenment yet? And he says no, but his public sphere will be considered like the Enlightenment sphere, where it says that we should be able to critically dialogue with other people outside of, the government should let us dialogue critically with other people, even if it's criticizing our government, because that would help better society. So everyone is in the sphere, and that's also problematic because he's writing at a time where women didn't have rights. There's still slavery, and he's writing as a from a male perspective. So I mean, that can still be very problematic. Yes, so that's who he leaves out. And then we move on to Habermas, which is, Habermas is a European philosopher from the Frankfurt School, which kind of goes kind of does have a Marxist kind of thread of thought of deconstructing things. So Habermas has this famous book called The Structural Transformation of the Public Sphere, where he kind of gives us a history of the public sphere, and he says how the public sphere, this space, has become a place where people don't dialogue about what's best for the community. They consume products, and there's all kinds of different products for different people. So all we're ever doing in that space is buying things, but never changing things through critical dialogue. So everyone is in it, but then that's also problematic to say that everyone's in it, considering not everyone could afford the best of what they want, or not everybody's able to consume everything they want or the quality of things that they want. But he did make the distinction that it's become a consumption sphere. So you can think of his sphere as a consumption sphere. So see, it just like keeps getting bigger and bigger, as opposed to when we came from Plato. And Habermas has this thing where just because we have more people in this public space, part of society, doesn't mean that there's an equal critical dialogue going on. So we may have mass culture up the roof, like more people are able to go to theater events, more people are able to have like really nice things, but that doesn't mean those people are interested in being philosophically trained and being experts in history and knowing how to critically dialogue and fix the problems just by critical dialogue. So he says those things are not mutually happening at the same time. Great, more people are in the sphere. That actually, almost he wants to say that it devalues what's happening in the public sphere, since there's no critical dialogue going on, since everything's consumption. So, okay, so that's my project. Let's review before I conclude. So we go from Plato, great, little dot, can't even see it, right? So that's his sphere, the philosophical sphere, the ruling sphere. Just a couple people in it deciding what's best for the city. Then we move on to Aristotle's politics. Great, more people are in the sphere, more people are able to talk, but it's still the same type of people. It's a group of Greek men. Great. Now we move on to Machiavelli. Great. Everyone can be in the sphere, but again, everyone can be in it, but that's still problematic, considering some people might be cowards because of circumstances. You're not just a coward. You're circumstantially a coward because, again, this public space, this public sphere is within other systems, other technological, religious, economical, political systems are working all intermingled, and it's hard to just take these things apart. Okay, so great, keeps getting bigger, and then we get to Habermas, which is like literally everyone, because everybody somehow gets to consume. But like again, I said, just because you're consuming doesn't mean, like I said, just because you're consuming doesn't mean you're critically dialogue. And if the pattern is just like getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, we can really just predict what the pattern's going to do, getting bigger and bigger, because when we leave Habermas here, so we're consuming all these things, but think about all our electronics. Who has access to all these electronics? It's people that are rich, people that have some sort of means to get those electronics. Okay, great. So they get electronics, and who makes those electronics? People in third world countries, right? So they might not even know what an iPad is, but they might be making it, right? They might not be able to afford it. So that's the point. And two, with all these technologies that we do have, we don't, like Habermas said, we're consuming things, and so with all these technologies that we have, these things are actually, it's e-waste, and we're literally selling that waste to other countries because we don't want it in our environment. but we're okay with polluting somebody else's environment. So those people are outside of our sphere and what's best for our community. So it's so complicated, as you see, because yes, great, more people on the sphere, but oh crap, we're leaving someone else out to be able to have our sphere. And that's complicated because it's clashes, it's an interest clash. So, concluding, the public sphere, PS, this PS keeps expanding conceptually every time philosophy defines it, but not socially. Because in reality, someone's always going to be left out of the sphere, the public sphere. Because remember, like I said, the public sphere exists inside of other things like economical, political, religious, technological systems. And you know, we don't just exist. The public sphere doesn't just exist. It's inside other things. It's because of other things. So, I mean, if these systems there's friction within the systems, but the systems aren't perfect, but we need those systems to have the sphere. So it's a complex discussion that we need to have, that we're having. So PS can never be big enough, so philosophers do need to keep expanding this circle, but we never need to say we've come far enough. We can never expand the circle enough to include everybody, because and what I mean by that too, you have to think about future generations. We might be leaving people out completely of existence because of the things that we're doing now. If we're damaging our ecological systems, if we're damaging our environment, if we're killing, if our ozone layer, we're destroying our ozone layer, then maybe no more human beings will be able to live in the next 1,000 years. So we're literally leaving people out of the conversation in our public sphere that might not even exist yet. So this isn't just about people that are in our world today. This is people that are not even here yet, don't even exist yet. So it's about future generations. So yeah, so just philosophers need to recognize that we can never expand this big enough. So we need to have this recognition, this PS plus that I call, just this recognition of seeing the expansions and saying, oh, okay, there's more work to be done. We can never include everybody. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.